Greetings, programmers. Welcome to TCoffeeAndCode for Wednesday, 2nd of June, 2021. Today, it's just you get me. Congratulations. Warranty disclaimer, I'm not going to read this. Basically, we're going to have a conversation. It's going to be hopefully interesting, and things are subject to change, my opinion, etc. I did want to update everybody. We have some changes in the near future on TCoffeeAndCode schedule. The data visualizations was a couple of weeks ago, and there were some technical issues, so we're going to redo that one, not next week, but the week after, so the 16th. Data visualizations re-visualized. And also, we moved that was when working with Apple M1 scheduled, so I've moved that out, and then moved the blockchain NFT out a little bit further as well. Working with Apple M1, I've ordered an Apple M1, but it wasn't going to get here in time, so it should get here this week, and then that will give me time to get content prepared around that. As you probably aware, on the roadmap in 10.5 schedule, which is the next major release of Rad Studio, we are adding M1 Mac support. So that's something to look forward to. So I don't know if I'll be doing any beta, alpha, sneak peeks in that session, but in the near future I will be. But definitely in that session, we'll be looking at options as far as what you can do today with running. So Parallels has updated to work on the M1 Mac, and so you can run the Windows 10 ARM under Parallels on the M1 Mac. And Windows 10 ARM was recently updated as well to add 64-bit Windows support. So it'll run Win64 applications. Hey, Miguel, you're on. Oh, he disappeared. You're back. Glad you could make it. We'll be able to run that on Windows Delphi and Windows 10 applications on that. So that kind of just give you a sneak peek of what you can do today before the release of 10.5, and then we'll also at some point in the future be looking at 10.5 native support on it as well. So let's see. Then we have, what else we have changed here? So I think that's it. Should be some good stuff coming up, and then I'll have more topics in the future as well. If there are, actually, today is a good time since I'm working on planning out the schedule beyond this. If there are topics you would like to see covered in the future that are not on that list, feel free to add those, and we will do our best, or I'll do my best to get them added. So, or just make a comment in the question area or the chat area if there's content you'd like to see covered that isn't on that list, and I will get them added. So Miguel, I didn't know if you were going to make it today. I saw an email from you and I didn't get a chance to get it read, but I have a slide here about me. I don't have the slide about you, but we can talk about you real quick as well. So I'm the Chief Developer Advocate for Embarcadero, longtime software developer, do lots of fun and cool stuff and work with amazing people like Miguel and the MVPs. So that's great. Miguel, real quick, why don't you tell us real quick about you for everybody that may or may not know who you are?
Sure, of course. I'm an electrical engineer, working mostly on embedded systems. IoT devices lately is now what has replaced embedded systems. It's the same thing now that everything must connect to the internet. Now they call it IoT, but basically embedded systems. Also a Delphi and C++ developer for a long time, including assembler when I have to deal with a low-level code. But definitely since Delphi came out, I took what everybody says is you have the power of C and C++ with the simplicity of Visual Basic. So that stands true even today, meaning I barely have to go to low-level libraries only when really needed, but as much as possible, I stay on Delphi. Delphi, and especially now that it's multi-platform, it's been a huge advantage. It's, all of you that are Delphi developers know it, that it's a great the hidden tool of many companies even today. So, so here I am, MVP for a long time, and have met Jim in person and trying to follow him and the rest of the MVP community.
That's right. We did meet at Code Rage in Scotts Valley a few years back, didn't we?
2014. That's it, correct.
Yeah.
That was the transition year for you with David I.
Yes. Yep. I love working with Miguel and other MVPs, and it's always great getting to meet them, but I can't always keep track because I talk to everybody so much online. It's like, if I met you in person, I don't remember. So yeah, that's right. I remember that actually, now that you mentioned it, because I remember you did that session on FireDAC, and I learned a lot. I was like, wow, this is like some really amazing stuff you were talking about there about FireDAC. And then you did FireDAC with the ETL one. Is that last week?
And the impressive thing, Jim, is still nowadays, still many people don't know something that was introduced. Well, it was introduced with AnyDAC and FireDAC by itself. I mean, it had this feature already when it was acquired by Embarcadero, well, Code Gear, and then renamed to FireDAC. But when I was last week with the ATL presentation, I was surprised to see that still many Delphi developers don't know this core feature. And the original developer modeled the FireDAC scripting engine against SQL Plus by Oracle. So it's 80–90% compatible with that tool, which is the industry standard for SQL scripting. But I was surprised to find that many don't know yet. And many even claim if we could schedule later a webinar or something focused just on that, which is something we need to talk about later.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Definitely, we'd love to talk about that. So Chris is asking, what does MVP stand for? So it's either most valuable professional or most valuable programmer. I've heard it go both directions. I don't know. What does it mean to you, Miguel? I'll say most valuable professional programmer person. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, it's a catch-all word. Basically, all the industry have standardized on using this word, but to me, it's really, I would rather use, based on what you do with the, since now you're the evangelist of Delphi developers and C++ developers, I would take a hint on that and say it's those enthusiasts that try to promote the product and try not only to exploit the product to its best, but spread the knowledge of how to exploit it to the best for the rest of the users, to the community. I think that's what makes a little different about the MVP, trying to share that knowledge and encourage people to make the best use out of
it. I describe MVPs as enthusiastic expert end users, because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an MVP candidate. Is I want somebody that is just like so excited about what they're doing that they're like, grabbing people on the street. Did you see this? Look at this. This is so amazing. And that's what I'm looking for, is people that just get so excited about it, about what the technology and what they're doing and stuff like that they're experts on it and that they are using Delphi C++ Builder day in, day out. So Microsoft,
it. Yeah,
David,
correct.
says Microsoft most valuable professionals. He says, I like to think of MVPs as the most valuable person that helps developers. Yes, totally agree, David. So great to see you on, David. And I saw Yilmaz as well, another MVP online. So this is a Q&A discussion. The idea is that the conversation will be driven around your questions. So do put your questions in the question panel, and we will potentially answer them, hopefully discuss them. I am totally down with, if you ask a question, the answer of, that's a good question, let's figure it out, is potentially the answer. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I'm willing to experiment, and with Yilmaz and David and Miguel chiming in, I'm sure we can answer all the questions eventually. So, grab a beverage and relax. Actually, I'm not using it today, but I did want to have a shout out to, Zach Briggs sent me this of Delphi Mystics, which I've done a couple things with Delphi Mystics. my thing is filtering it out. DelphiMystics.com. Check it out. He sent me a cool mug. And if you know me, I have a drinking problem. So this is my mug of water I drink from. As long as my drinking problem's isolated to water, I'm not too worried about it. But
quite a big mug.
yep, I had a slightly smaller one, but I had it full of ice water and dropped it, and the metal straw went through the bottom of the mug because it hit so much force and just punched a hole in the bottom. So I had to get a new mug and upgraded to the biggest one now. Oh, and I will go ahead and address the nose in the room. I have a scar on my nose, or a gash on my nose. I developed vertigo as a result of my concussion last year. And yes, a couple weeks ago, I was walking in and just lost my balance from vertigo and face planted right into the wall. Didn't break it, but split my nose open. It's a lot better than it was, but can't really hide it. I thought about putting a Band-Aid over or whatever. I was like, no, whatever. It is what it is. We all have noses. We've all been hurt. So
definitely, we all have looked worse than that, so don't worry.
Yeah. I just for those things that I know everybody's gonna be seeing it. It's like, what's going on with Jim's nose? So yeah. All right. So I do have a poll question here. And let me get the poll question up here about scripting languages. So what scripting language do you use, if you use any? I guess. I mean, I should have added that as well. Whether or not you use any scripting languages at all, which is entirely possible. So Chris suggested donate some gadgets with every new license sold or every renewal of subscription. That would be fun. Andrew said, I thought you got the nose from flying backward down the Death Star trench in the background. Yeah, that's right. Should look where I'm flying.
Jim, would I mind asking why you didn't include Object Pascal here?
You know what? I should have. You're right, because Object Pascal, there is a lot of Object Pascal scripting.
Actually, many of the developers implicitly use it every time they use fast reports or the good old rate reports.
That's true. That's actually a really good point. Well, and so we can definitely talk about that. And that's kind of what I wanted to just kind of get some,
Sure.
conversation sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. I mean, tools like the reporting tools, that's what many that don't know exactly what a scripting engine is. Fast reports and rate reports, the good old rate reports, both come with a built-in scripting engine, and it's Object Pascal. Now, that is regardless, you decide to add scripting to your own application and install either an open source like the Pascal script or any of commercial ones like TMS softwares. But those reporting tools have its own already built in, and most users have to use it if you want to create advanced reports.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. Well, I'm still getting some more votes coming in. So we're about 50% of the votes in, and JavaScript is in the lead with other. It's probably Object Pascal. I should add another poll to ask if it's Object Pascal. Nobody's using Lua. Lua was really big a few years back. It's still big in games, interestingly. I'm surprised how often I see games that either the game system or the mod system for the game uses Lua script. I'm not sure why that is about Lua. I don't know a whole lot about it. But JavaScript is the number one, followed by other, followed by Python. So I will share the results of the poll so everybody can see it there. So yes, Al's pointed out TMS has a tool set for scripting. So I don't have a lot of slides for this, but I am definitely down with pulling up web pages to talk about stuff. And if everybody has things they want to mention and stuff as well. Yeah, Tms Scripter. Oh, let me share my screen again. Stop, hide the slide, share my screen. Okay, so TMS Scripter, I guess this is the product page. Come on, TMS software.
It's Script Studio.
Yeah, Script Studio. And actually, this is TMS has a few things. So first of all, I love all the tech partners, even the ones that have like one little small thing. They're amazing. That's one thing I love, is that you can probably find a component for whatever you want to do with Delphi. It makes it amazing where you can just drop some components in the form. So I don't want to downplay any tech partners, but TMS is one of those tech partners that if you're not aware of what they have, you really need to go check it out, because they have such a huge selection of things here. Scripter, there it is.
Well, maybe some of the audience can drive us better with some of their questions, but I would start by just highlighting that what a scripting tool is. Did you have any slide about that? So we can have a brief introduction.
I did want to talk about that. The idea that a script. So that's a good place to start. Why would you want to combine scripting with native? So we all know, the reason, one of the things that makes Delphi amazing is that it is compiled to machine code, right? You can compile it down to native ARM code for mobile devices, native x86 code for Windows and for desktops. And that gives you good performance, good memory management, and all that great stuff. But while scripting doesn't, I mean, there's some JIT compiles where it try to compile it in just in time and stuff like that. But I guess why would you want to script things? It really, for me, there's two things it comes down to. One is that last minute customization, right? The ability to make changes that aren't tied to, don't need to be pre-compiled in. And so that'd be one. But what else would you say would be reasons behind scripting and the advantages of scripting, Miguel? Why would somebody maybe want to include scripting in their application?
Well, I'll go back to the core question, the example, but before that, yes, just elaborate on the description you just made. A scripting engine is one that allows you to run custom code with a runtime interpreter, meaning you don't need to compile. Basically, it means most of the times that is run directly either on an application or in a shell. So if you are in the good old Windows command line, those batch files now, technically speaking, are script files. In the old days, we just call them batch files or command files, but technically nowadays, you will find the references. This is a script that is run by the shell. But then the shell will only recognize specific commands, which are the ones that you usually would put together on the script. Now, if you go with a more advanced shell like Powershell, then the syntax and the commands are even more, the set of available commands. But this is a good point because usually in the past, only shells, operating system shells, good old DOS, then Windows command line, and then Linux, used to have this scripting ability where you call all the commands in one single file, and then the shell was able to take that text file and run by one all of those commands interactively. But then the thing is that in your application, you might find the need that the end user needs to have some flexibility for some specific features, but requires can be minor or can be complex logic that he needs to customize on your program. So the easy way to do it, instead of having to create a custom plugin or instead of having to create a custom binary for that user, is instead you create a generic engine that then he or she can plug in this script file that will run the commands that you allowed him to run with the scripting engine that you implemented in your program. So I'll go back to that very example that most users will recognize immediately. When you're creating reports in fast reports or rate reports, you can go by using the GUI designer and have all the bands and all the body of your reports and the images, but you'll have a very, very simple report. But when you need even the slightest of the complexity added advanced features into your report, like having a label that changes depending on the group that you are summarizing against, or you want the shaded color of the background to change depending on the number of the page, these minor things require you to go into the scripting engine that it's inside it. And all of them support Object Pascal, so you don't deviate from your familiarity with Object Pascal. Then that's a good example because many users must have used this feature at one time in their life if you are using some kind of advanced complexity in your report. So that's the way these report vendors solve that issue. How do you add the flexibility for the end user to get advanced results that are totally up to you, the specific rules on which you want to change a color on the background, or the specific rules on which you want to run a label to show or not to show at all? It's up to you. So then the scripting engine gives you the total power, and it's not, the vendor doesn't have to create super advanced functions, but instead they plug in the scripting engine, and then the product will recognize your script and then follow up accordingly. So this is a very good example. And again, Jim, this is the very reason why scripting is available in gaming engines, because then you can also add some custom features or custom functionality to your game.
Yeah.
And one point here, just to remind to the audience, is Lua, from what I read, is one of the reasons it became so popular for gamers is gamers mostly are not developers, and they are, in the good word, they are lazy in terms that they don't want to learn something advanced like C or C++ or even JavaScript, because JavaScript, let's remember, is modeled against C++ and C. So they want something so simple that then there was this group of gamers. Actually, it was in Brazil. That's what Lua is moon in Portuguese. So
oh, really?
there was these gamers. Yes, Lua is moon in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. So these guys created this project. I think it was in a university, but it was a group of gamers. And they modeled this against Pascal. If you see, Lua is 80% Pascal, just like Python. It's a Pascalish programming language. So it's so simple to learn that that's why it took off. So it's this industry standard, de facto standard for gaming.
You know, it's interesting. You look at programming languages, and you see you have the JavaScript curly brace club, right? That's the Java, but then everything else, it's like, oh, that's very much Pascal-like. And there, you know, there are common ancestries, Ada and such, that did inspire all of them. So maybe not necessarily directly inspired by that, but it's interesting to see if it's not in the curly brace club, it really, you look at it, and you're like, oh, this makes sense to me as a Object Pascal developer. So I never thought about Lua as being, I was going to see if they had some like a simple hello world type thing on here.
And for any computer advocate that has a little knowledge of reading on the history, one of the main reasons of why Pascal became so famous is, number one, it's elegant and it's simple to read. But the number two is a single pass compiler. So implementing a compiler in Pascal is very fast and very simple. You don't get into complexities. So Lua is modeled against all these features of Pascal. That's why Lua is very simple to implement and fast for gaming.
There we go. Now that does look rather Pascal-like.
Are you showing something? It doesn't show.
Oh, is it not showing? Oh, why is it not showing?
No.
What am I showing? Oh, I'm showing the wrong.
Monitor.
That's weird. It swapped around what display was showing. Sorry about that. Oh, by the way, is my audio okay? I was having some audio issues earlier. I think I tried to fix it. Hopefully I did. Does it sounding good?
You sound pretty good. This session you have sound pretty good. No, not cutting or stuttering at all.
All right. I spent so much time trying to get my audio working right, but it seems like it's always not. So yeah, so there's a simple Lua script there. Definitely looks a little Pascal-like. So yeah, some great reasons. That's great. There's some great things about scripting. I was actually, you mentioned Fast Report. I was just talking to a Delphi developer the other day that it was a really interesting conversation actually, and I did an interview with him. I need to get published, but he was talking about the fact that he doesn't see himself as a programmer. He sees himself as a solution provider, right? His goal is not to write code. He did something because I don't get paid to write code. I get paid to fix problems. And I was like, that's a really good point. You know, and so he saw a problem in the industry, or in the industry he was familiar with, and so he made some software to fix it. And he says he loves Delphi because it's so easy to just grab the pieces and put them together. And that's one of the things that's great about Delphi is earlier you mentioned Delphi is kind of the combining the best of VB and Visual C++, right? And so the VB element is that rapid development where you just drop some components and connect things together. So I like to say that Delphi is the original low-code programming tool for people that like to write code sometimes, because that's the great thing, is that you can do so much with so little code, but then if you want to, you can write as much code as you want to, and so you're not limited, which is a big deal to me. But one of the things, I was talking to this guy though, he said he just discovered Report Builder, I think it was Report Builder, had scripting support, and he'd been using just it as a high-level reporting tool, and just generating reports, and then discovered he could customize the reports by putting scripting in there. And he's like, this changes everything, because that just gives you so much more power in there. And there's, technically speaking, any Turing complete programming language, which most all programming languages are, can do anything. But some languages have a different way of expressing things that open or make more suited for certain things. So technically you can do anything in Delphi, for example, but sometimes there are some things that being able to express them in a different programming language, like SQL, for example, like the local SQL and the scripting you're talking about with FireDAC, some of that stuff gives you the ability to accomplish things with less code, or accomplish things in a way that makes more sense or is easier to understand. So yeah, that's great stuff there. So a lot of people talk about PowerShell. PowerShell is amazing. I use PowerShell a lot as well. I was at the Microsoft, I want to say it was back when they called it PDC, Professional Developer Conference, when they introduced PowerShell. They called it Monad. I think I still have a little bit of Monad swag around someplace from when they introduced it. Really cool. It's if you're not familiar with PowerShell, it is based on the Bash and Linux shells, Unix and Linux shells, in this idea that you can pipe things together, and very inspired by that. But it's not piping it as text, it's piping it as objects, which is kind of a little more kind of fairly powerful. It's got some weird syntaxes to it, but once you get past that, it's really, really powerful what you can do with it. And then Chris says he uses PowerShell, or PowerShell and WPS. I'm not familiar with WPS. Did he ask? Are you familiar with WPS, Miguel?
PBS, Visual Basic Scripting. Yes, that is very popular in the Windows arena. Oh. And many code is published. It's fading out since PowerShell came out. But in the 90s, it was, I would say, it was the top scripting engine that was not, when you did require some advanced programming, because this is the point. Originally, the Windows command line, let's call it the original Windows shell, not the PowerShell, but the Windows shell, was almost a copy borrow of the good old MS-DOS. So the power was very limited. So at that time, you wanted to do something very advanced, you went to BBS, because it was built in even since Windows 95. So the runtime engine for scripting with BBS was introduced at the very same time as Visual Basic. So that was your option if you wanted to do something advanced in the command line, the simple MS-DOS commands. But then PowerShell came in, and nowadays I've seen Visual Basic scripts only on, they've been running for a long time, but not for new projects. New projects, most people will turn to PowerShell.
So I misread it. It's WBS, which is Windows Scripting Host. Wait, I said it wrong. Hold on, let me try it one more time here. He elaborated on it. WBS, yeah, Windows, or WSH, Windows Scripting Host, which is
okay. The Windows Scripting Host is the technology where you can register a scripting engine, one of them being BBS. So the host itself is uploading the, let's call it the personality, same as the RAD Studio. So the Windows Scripting Host must have some personality register, and usually it's by the extension. So if you have a VBS extension on a file, and you have the Visual Basic engine registered on the Windows Scripting Host, then it would automatically run that using that engine. And the other one that is now also pre-registered in Windows machines is JS, the JavaScript one. So those are like the already pre-registered in Windows scripting host. There is some open source projects that allow you to also register an Object Pascal script engine for Windows scripting host, WHS. They have not taken off because you have PowerShell. So if you have, it's basically for system administrators that work with Windows servers or that want to automate some installation script. So then they will prefer go with this, the standard, which is PowerShell. Now, there is one thing here. Installers, and it comes to my mind, InnoSetup. They also have a scripting engine built in, and InnoSetup is modeled against Object Pascal. But all installers have a script. You define actually how the installer works by defining a script. Then the installer will simply pre-compile it into the actual executable of the installer. But the logic of how you're installing and what to do, it's defining a script by the installer itself.
Yeah, David Cornelius, another MVP, commented about that. He uses InnoSetup's Pascal script quite a bit. InnoSetup's it's made in Delphi, very, very popular installer. There's a few installers. I find a lot of very utilitarian programs, programs that are, just really useful are written in Delphi. It's interesting how often that happens. And then let's see, Gerard commented about, make sure I'm sharing the right screen. I am, all right. Tyobe's Python on Tyobe has been climbing quite a bit, which is true, is definitely going up in popularity. Python, so it's interesting. Python is really an integration tool. A lot of scripting tools are integration tools. JavaScript is kind of in a unique place because it is the lingua franca of powering the web. Although WebAssembly, which we have a WebAssembly webinar coming up, that's not part of TCoffeeAndCode. Definitely check that out if you're interested in WebAssembly. WebAssembly is really making some big inroads, but Python is all about integrating things together. So interestingly, if you actually, Python itself is not a super efficient programming language, but but it does leverage all these native libraries that are really efficient. So when you're calling into the library and thinking the library do the work, then Python's fast. But when you're trying to do the code in Python, it's not near as fast. But that's one of the things I love about the Python for Delphi interface, is that it lets you use all these Python libraries natively from Delphi. And since they're native code libraries, you get that amazing performance. So that's another thing that's really a great benefit of integrating scripting, is that it gives you access to a broader range of libraries that you might not otherwise have access to. Let's see. Oh, and actually, one more thing. If you aren't familiar with PyScripter, definitely should check this IDE out, PyScripter, made in Delphi. I was aware of this. I knew it was made in Delphi, and I'd looked at it briefly. They just came out with a new 4.0 release a month ago, and actually I think there's another update coming here in the near future as well. But it's a really good Python IDE made in Delphi. It has so it has an immediate window down here at the bottom. And the really cool thing is, if you write some Python code and then set a breakpoint, and then you go down here and you can write in the immediate window and in the context of your script that's running. And it's so cool that you can write code to interact with a program while you're debugging it. That's another thing that's kind of cool about scripting engines as well, is that ability to dynamically do things. But
that is a good point, Jim, is that scripting, because it's run interactively, in other words, line by line, that is one thing that, for those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, might remember that was the key feature of using BASIC. That BASIC, you could just break the code anytime, at any point in time, and you can just browse and check all the variables, and even continue executing from that point in time, because it was interpreted interactively. So for a few times, everybody went to compile code, and you forgot about that feature of advantage of having interpreted commands. And now with Python, everybody is saying, oh, now I can do this. Yeah, it was there all the time with the older languages, only that definitely Python is a much more advanced and modern language compared to the good old BASIC. But the feature of being interpreted and being able to break it at any time and check the state of your program and all variables, it reminds me of the good old quick BASIC and all those ideas, which you could do exactly the same thing.
Yep.
And guess what? Something I was showing our audience last week is FireDAC has a scripting, SQL scripting engine, and because it's interpreted, it has the exact same feature. You can interrupt it at any time, and even with the built-in demo that it has, which is the script GUI runner, you can either step line by line on your script and see the results. You can even manually intercept it and then see what happened, or you can pause it and then go to your database engine and see if what you set it to do was actually done, and then confirm that the data has been posted, deleted, whatever, and then come back and continue running your script. So the idea of running this script, to me, is it's a step ahead even of the SQL Plus by Oracle. SQL Plus by Oracle is hard to break and then do some interactive checks. It's more manual, more cumbersome, but the script GUI utility that comes with FireDAC, it combines the best of both worlds. So this GUI, it has an editor. You can step line by line or just run the whole script, and you can break it at any moment and either check it right there or go and yourself check it in your database engine. So these are the features of an interpreted language, which all scripting languages belong to. They are interpreted, so you automatically have this feature built in.
Yeah. So there's a comment here that says, what about using operating specific functionality not provided by Delphi itself? So there is, share my screen again. So there is DOS command. I've used this before. This is a great utility, or not great utility, great component suite for Delphi. And actually, I have a thought now that I'm wondering about. Could you, I would guess you could use DOS command to run PowerShell as well. So what this does is it creates a command window and lets you capture the output. So you can send commands to it and then read the commands back, and gives you much better control over interacting with a command shell, which I would, like I said, I would assume that you could do it with PowerShell as well, or really any console application. So definitely, if you are wanting to do that, take a look at that. I'm curious if anybody's used that with PowerShell, actually, now I think about it. Someone asked about what some of the other scripting languages people use. Clearly, Object Pascal is one of them. If you want to add just in the chat window what scripting languages you use that are in the other category, then we can kind of get a simple view of those there. Template engines. Conrad mentions template engines. Simpar Delphi template engine, which uses to generate email and web content. It also uses scripting, but mainly focused on generating of dynamic textual content based on the presentation of dynamic textual content based on presented data, rather than just providing functions that control by application. Yeah, actually, I used to do a lot of template engine stuff. That is a really great thing to be aware of if you're not using template engines. You can do some of it with I can't remember what it's called. Page producers in Delphi kind of give you some ability to templating as well. But yeah, template engines, very powerful stuff. I have not used the Simpar. I saw Simpar, so if you've used that, Conrad, I'd love your impressions of it. It sounds like you have used it. It looks really cool. Definitely something I want to check out. Roland's asking a question. It's kind of off topic here, but I'm going to go ahead and try and jump in here and answer it. He says, I haven't found the answer yet. How does one set up the deployment for a Mac OS application to integrate a .o or .dylib files that were compiled with GNU, C++ or similar? So you would need to, let me see if I can remember this correctly. Did I open? What did I do?
You need to open the deployment page of the project. Yeah, create a project and then
I broke my IDE.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what I did. I was just playing with it earlier and I messed. Let me see. What did I do? I remember working at this one place, and it was working in Delphi, and we were building this line of business database application. And the manager was notorious for having clients in, and then coming over to walking up behind me as I'm working and saying, "Hey Jim, can you demo this feature for him real quick?" I'm like, I don't even know if it's going to compile right now. Something weird's going on here. Yeah, I messed something up. Weird. All right, I will fix that later. So I guess I won't jump into that now. Anyway, yeah, you can do it through the deployment. You can include it through the deployment manager, but then you would need to have the also the header file, right, so that you could interface with it. Were you going to add something more to that, Miguel?
I was trying to see if I have a sample code quickly here. I remember in the demos of Delphi, there's one of the demos of FireDAC for SQLite. That's exactly what we want to show, because that one compiles in multi-platform. And then when compiling a multi-platform on the deployment page, you can see that the Mac OS has those specific, it's added manually the entries for the SQLite library, the DynaLib. So that's a pretty good example that our users audience can see, because it's in the demos of Delphi.
Yeah. You want to open that up real quick? I just gave you can share your screen if you want to. If you want to,
okay.
If not.
Yeah, let me quickly find it. Please entertain the audience in the meantime. Let me just find it real quick, and then I'll show it to them.
Anybody launching Delphi or PowerScript shells, PowerShell Delphi, I would suggest looking at